you, Senator. Next week, we'll hear from Senator Rosen. Senator Rosen, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lujan and Ranking Member Thune, for holding this really important hearing, and of course for the witnesses for being here today. And you know, the importance of spectrum authority for key bipartisan broadband programs, it's so important. And of course, we know last year Congress passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I was proud to help write that. We drafted key broadband provisions in the law, including my Middle Mile Broadband Deployment Act and the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program. It invests in this last mile infrastructure. This once-in-a-lifetime investment in our nation's broadband infrastructure has the potential to finally close our digital divide. And so this question is for all of the witnesses. If the FCC's spectrum authority were to lapse, what impact would that have on implementing the broadband provisions of the bipartisan infrastructure law, including the BEAD program, the Middle Mile Infrastructure Program, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, of course, as well as others? So we can start with Ms. Baker, move on to Mr. Von Ah, Mr. Lewis, and then Dr. Bazelon. Ms. Baker.
Thank you for your question, and thank you for all of the work that you did on the infrastructure bill, and also for mandating that it was technology neutral. As you know, wireless needs two parts for this service. We need the infrastructure itself as we build out, which we're spending $30 billion a year in building out, but we also need spectrum. So if the FCC doesn't have the auction authority to provide us more spectrum, then we can't. There's only so much we can do. So it's very important for broadband going forward, and for also implementation of the fixed mobile side of the equation for states as they decide how to spend the BEAD revenue, which again, 5G home is a really good option to serve rural and unserved areas with the BEAD program. So we look at that as an opportunity, but it's important for the FCC to continue to auction spectrum.
Thank you. Mr. Von Ah.
Thank you for that question. I don't think our work really spoke to that issue. I think I would defer to my colleagues on the panel to answer your question more fully.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your championing the Middle Mile Broadband Deployment Act. I agree that I don't think it has a direct impact, but it has the complementary effect of if we don't have the infrastructure, then we don't serve rural areas. If we don't have the spectrum, then we also can't serve rural areas with an all-of-the-above approach to make sure that folks are connected. Fiber, wireless, fixed wireless are all part of the solution to make sure that everyone is connected.
Thank you. And Ms. Baker. I'm sorry, Dr. Bazelon, sorry.
Thank you, Senator. Spectrum Auction Authority is an integral part of our spectrum management strategy, and it would be handicapping the development of the wireless sector to not include that for the policymakers, for the FCC going forward. And that would bias and handicap the ability to roll out those programs.
Thank you. In the minute or so I have left, I want to talk about spectrum policy and the impact on the wireless workforce, because wireless industry has been a significant driver of U.S. innovation. Investments in wireless deployment have ushered in services and devices that millions of Americans have depended on. Of course, smartphones, wearables, all of our apps. And the industry does rely on highly skilled workers to run and maintain our networks, and our telecommunications workforce is aging. There are far fewer younger employees with experience needed to fill these positions in the wireless industry. So, Mr. Lewis, in your testimony, you discussed the ways that FCC could use auction design to encourage greater participation of underrepresented communities in the wireless industry. So what impact can a strong U.S. spectrum policy have on hiring, retaining, training workers in the wireless industry, particularly as we look to expand and diversify our workforce?
Thank you, Senator. I believe there's a number of ways that it could have an impact, both on the hiring and employee side as well as on the ownership side. On the hiring side, setting standards for hiring or contracting with vendors can set a high bar for companies that are receiving the public airwaves to live up to those sorts of standards. On the the structure on the can impact the ownership side in promoting competition, making sure that we set up auction structures that allow for small women and minority-owned businesses to compete in the auctions through smaller license areas and bidding credits. And honestly, we may not have all the ideas, but I'm interested in finding out what other ideas can be brought forward. I celebrate that Chair Rosenworcel recently reinstated the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Digital Empowerment, and those are the sorts of things that we love to see at the FCC, where all stakeholders can come together and come up with other tactics to promote diversity.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is up.